Hello everyone, welcome back to another interview here on the Play on GAA channel. Today I have Mark Kelly with me here today, the founder of the Dudes and Dogs organisation. It started over in Bristol in England and now it's made its way to Ireland. Mark, this is a really good organisation. I really like the idea behind it. Obviously mental health is something that needs to be taken very seriously among Ireland now. I mean, obviously the rate of suicide, especially among men,
Absolutely.
it needs to we need to take it more serious. So do you want to just briefly go through, what the organization is, how it came about, etc.?
Yeah. Seamus, first of all, thanks for having me on. No, I have to correct you there. I didn't found it. It was actually Rob Osman who he has to take full credit for this. I'm just getting it rolled out in Ireland, but the whole premise behind it is it's getting guys out. It's a walk and a talk. You know, our four-legged friends, they're always there for us, and fellas are notoriously difficult to get out talking. They're notoriously difficult to talk about their feelings. Like you've probably seen it firsthand within playing GAA, especially with it's a very competitive environment, and fellas are brought up from a young age to have that drive within them. It's this idea of you have to man up, you have to be tough, you have to go out. You have to be number one, and to hell with everybody else. But the thing about it is, we're much better when we're supporting one another, and we're much better when we're actually able to talk about the things that are going on for us and talk about the things that are affecting us. We almost pretend at times that things like our mental health don't affect us because we're not allowed to show any kind of weakness, and that's it's not a reflection of who we are as people. We're human. We have feelings, we have emotions. There's a lot of different things going on with again, going back to your experience in the GAA, you're much more than just a GAA player. You're a son, you're a brother, you're a cousin, you're a nephew. You're all different types of things. So it started 2018, and the whole idea is just get guys out walking and get them out talking. And if there's a dog there, they're more likely to talk, or they're more likely to come together because it's something that takes you outside of yourself.
Yeah.
That's the
No, my experience is that obviously the dog is often the icebreaker, and if the dog can do something funny, it can get you talking about, the dog running after the ball, etc. So I know you're right about the experience of my experience in the GA is you're right. A lot of times it'd be put down to just man up, get stuck in, get on with it. And often there was a bit of, not by any fault of any of the coaches or any of the players there's just a general lack of awareness about what mental health can be and the forms that it can take on, that some players just wouldn't want the ball. Nothing to do with being afraid, but because they just don't want to be there, and it's something to do with kind of being anxious. They don't want to be in the ball, they don't want to take responsibility, etc. And I think that the GAA definitely is on a path towards understanding that. I mean, recently enough, that even though it's a completely unrelated point, but the whole not even one drink home, and it's talking about things that are attached. I mean, if you look back at the history in the GAA, there is a saddening link, in my opinion, between the GAA and alcohol. That every single GAA player seems to open a pub the second that they retire. It seems to really go hand in hand at every match after you go for pints, and I feel like that leads a lot of kind of GAA players that if they lose a match, which speaking personally, if you lose a championship match, like every GAA player will tell you, it's a devastating feeling if you lose a championship match. You built up to it for so long, that the going for pints is seen as kind of a healing thing. And I think obviously with alcohol being an active depressant, I feel like that's a dangerous trend. And I feel like it can lead a lot of young men down a path of kind of alcoholism, etc., especially when they retire and they kind of long for the days when they would go for pints with their teammates after a game. I feel like kind of getting the focus away from alcohol could be a real plus for the GA.
I think that's a great point you're making, and I suppose doing that would require a big culture shift in Ireland. Um, I'd say it's probably going to be difficult to start with, but it's one of those things that if it's done right, then there's no reason that it can't happen. I mean, I think among the major sports organizations on the island, I think the GAA are being quite good at looking proactively at looking after players' health. I mean, I mentioned briefly there before the Cusics, and obviously being down in Cork here. Um, this is a big GAA county, and I'm learning that more and more as I'm living here. Um, I never like I sort of looked at for me. I've always looked at a GAA as an outsider, being from the north and Donegal born, but Derry raised. And in Derry, it was always a country thing. You know, if you were from the town, you didn't play hurling, and I really missed out. I would have loved to have grown up playing hurling. I think that I missed a lot, but by the same token, I could have dodged. You know, I probably dodged a lot of things that would have made my mental health a lot worse. And it's very, you know, it's interesting you bring up that link with alcohol and how everything seems to be tied to the pub. You know, and this idea that once you finish playing, you know, you're just going to go and run a pub anyway, and it would be, I suppose.
It's definitely an idea that's fading. I think a
Yeah.
lot of players now are going straight into punditry or
Mm.
podcasting post retirement. And I mean
Mm.
YouTube and all this stuff. Like me myself started on YouTube. Like that's opened the door for a lot of people to go and do it themselves. I mean, back in
Yeah.
the day, you would have had to get a job in RTE, or you would have had to get a job at
Yeah.
TG Car or somewhere like that. There was only the few that you could go to. But now, I mean, if you're a GAR player and you played at the top level, that's a very, very viable route to go down. I mean, myself, I'd always
Yeah.
listen to an ex-player because the knowledge that they can give is people like me, we just can't give that. I've never played in Croke Park. I've never played in an All-Ireland final. So
Yeah.
the knowledge that they can give is a different level. So I think, and the rising level of awareness to it, I mean, obviously people like Paddy O'Shea are a shining example that had, you know, difficulty with alcohol, like, you
Yeah.
know, after his retirement, and, you know, he had the pub and everything that, and then obviously George Best as a shining example outside of the GAA, but a man who, you know, struggled a lot with alcoholism following
Mm-hmm.
his career. And I think that the level of awareness definitely has got better, that the level of the health awareness around, you know, this is what it will do to you if you drink alcohol to
Mm-hmm.
this level, that it will not only affect your game, but affect your mental health.
Mm-hmm.
That I feel like it's becoming more and more knowledgeable, but sadly, I still think that it will still happen quite around the country, that there is the attitude that attaches the two at the hip is
Yeah.
still there. And I feel like
That's
as long as it's under control, it's fine. But when players are actively using alcohol to heal, I feel like
mm-hmm.
that's when it's very dangerous. I mean, Rory Stories is another example that I'd always look to, that he talked about gambling. He talks about gambling
Mm-hmm.
a lot. And he said that following a championship defeat, that he went out and he kind of blew a lot of money on gambling and on alcohol as a way to kind of cope with the fact that they just lost the
Yeah.
championship match. Because what does it all tie back to? It ties back to the fact that they can't openly say, I'm depressed, I have
Yeah.
anxiety, I hate the fact that we lost that game, I feel so ashamed, I feel so, especially the biggest example I give is if a player made a mistake which directly led to a key moment or a key turning point in the game. Say if a goalkeeper, you know, dropped the ball into the net, or a fullback slipped and it ended up with a goal, or a forward missed a brilliant chance to win the game, that player could be much more vulnerable to mental health, because they feel genuinely ashamed. And trust me, I've been there. I haven't turned up sometimes in games that have really mattered to me, and after it, you'd feel really ashamed. You'd feel really like you've not only let yourself down, but you've let your club down, your coaches down. When there is that much emphasis placed on it, I think the ability to be able to talk it out when you've genuinely just made an honest mistake is crucial.
Man, that's heartbreaking to hear that. You know, you'd have feelings of shame, and it's a as you say, it's a game.
Yeah.
It's to be played. It's there to be enjoyed, and it's 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 nice that you're bringing the examples of people who I'd imagine as a GA player, you're almost held up as a god within the local community.
Well,
You're
definitely if you win,
yeah,
if you win something, it's priceless to the area.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
we won this, even to give this example, when we were in under 14s, we won the Division 1 Fela, and we were the first team in my club, like Whitehall Column Kill. We were the first team in our club's history to do that, and just to see the emotion that day, to see how many people were fully grown men were crying and hugging us, and it meant so much to them. That on the flip side, then we would have seen, especially for such a young kid, if you had made a mistake in that final and then they had a cost you the failure, that's
Mm.
hard to come back from. And trust me, it sticks with you.
I'd imagine it does, and that's a hell of a lot of pressure to be putting on a 14-year-old or a 13-year-old. You're talking about George Best and Paddy O'Shea there. One one of the as I grow, I sort of see more and more like these people. They're not larger than life. They're human beings, and I love the way that you're talking about forums like YouTube and podcasting, giving yourself and other people who've played the game, maybe not at the highest level, but you still have valuable insight, and you have maybe something of interest to say. But right and all, not everybody can. Not every player can go off and have the same sort of career that Joe Brawley's having or
Mm-hmm.
Pat's. Not everybody can do that. That's just fact of life. But it's good that guys like yourself can come in and put a human perspective on it because Paddy O'Shea, George Best, they're human beings. They're men, and
Yeah, and you're
there's
right. You're right with the hero aspect, that if you were a top player, you do get benefits in outside life. I mean,
yeah,
there's no question about it. You're looked on more favorably if you scored a winning goal in the club final for
yeah,
for your club. If you're the hero of the parish, your hero of the local, like you get people looking on you more favorably. And
yeah,
I feel like, while it is obviously crucial to the area and it gives so many people a focus, which is brilliant, because the flip side of the mental health coin with GAA is that it can take a lot of people who don't really have a focus, who don't really have much to aim for, and to think, right, I'm going to get onto this senior side over the next year. I'm going to work so hard. I'm going to get that wing back position. I'm going to start for the seniors, and we're going to try win a championship. It can give a
mm-hmm,
focus to people who are lacking focus, and that's a huge trait
mm-hmm,
that the GAA has. As well as that, the inclusivity is another thing that has a huge part in the GAA, especially for, say, people who have moved into the area, who are freshly moved in from, say, another country or from another
mm-hmm,
community. It makes you feel welcome if you get involved in the GAA,
yeah,
and everyone is welcome. That
yeah,
being said, at the top level, where it's super serious and it's the best versus the best, that's when I feel like the pressure can kind of crack a few players, especially if they're not used to talking about their feelings.
yeah. That's understandable. I mean, that's the same, I think, in any walk of life. But the inclusivity part is key. And like I lived in Germany when I was younger, and one thing that helped me settle was I joined a local GAA club. I never played, but I went out for practices, and it was great to have a bit of camaraderie, and it was great to meet that from the island and just have a bit of crack with them, and you felt like you were at home because it can like living in another country. It can be a very 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 lonely experience, and it can be very susceptible to creeping thoughts, and your mental health can take a serious downturn.
Mm-hmm.
But it's good, and I think one of the good things about dudes and dogs is that everybody's on the same level. Mental health or mental illness. Well, I think it's important to differentiate the two. Everybody has mental health. We all have to look after our mental health.
Yeah.
Physical, same thing. A mental illness is a different kettle of fish. But having problems with it it's a great leveler, and it's very humbling. Like,
Yeah.
but you support group, and you talk about gambling addiction, you talk about alcohol addiction, and for a lot of people who've gone through the 12 steps, one thing they'll find is that their addiction doesn't care who they are.
Yeah. Very true.
It doesn't care if you're an all-star. It doesn't care how many All-Irelands you've won. It doesn't care what club you play for. If you're down in the lowest lows, it doesn't matter. But if you're able to go somewhere and have a connection with somebody who is feeling the same, it brings you onto the same level. And I like that. I think it was Ray Calvin that did a piece last year on RTE, and he talked about his own struggles with his mental health. And I think it's very important that top sports figures and top figures like that in all walks of life are able to come out and talk about things like that so openly, because it makes people realize that, my God, anybody can be affected by this. And, if it could happen to him, it could happen to
anyone. Yeah, 100%.
And that I think is important, and I think it's important to focus on the impact that stuff like the GAA can have on helping people look after themselves.
No, without doubt, because I mean, you mentioned there about that it can get anyone, and the example that I'll always give is Tyson Fury. And obviously he came out and he was so open about, after he won the heavyweight championship, that his mental health took a dive. And, that shows that it can really get anyone. And one of the biggest myths, I mean, that I'd love to just say personally, about mental health, and I'm sure you'd agree with this, is that for people who aren't really that, up to date with knowing, is that your mental health being held, being up to scratch is a continuous process. It's not one day you walk into a therapist and you talk for an hour and then you never ever experience mental health problems again. It's a work in progress. I'd compare it a lot to being, in the gym, your physical health. You have to keep going to stay in the top shape that you can be in. Same with mental health. If you have to identify the things that make you feel good and the things that make you feel bad. Say if it's toxic people, or if drinking puts you in the hole, or if drugs put you in the hole, or gambling, you have to cut out the toxic things from your life and put yourself around positive things. And it's a continuous process where you could get to a stage in your life where your mental health is impeccable. But if you don't keep grinding away on it and keep yourself healthy, it can fall very quickly.
Yeah, that's so true. So true, Seamus. It's an ongoing, it's an all-time thing. It's not a sometimes thing. And I think, sports is a great way of framing mental health struggles, because if you frame it in those terms, people can understand it a lot better. People can relate to it, and it's, you're right in saying it's like going to the gym. If you don't exercise, if you don't look after yourself, worse things are going to slip. You're not just going to reach a point where you all of a sudden say, "Oh, I'm grand, nothing's wrong with me." It's a long process, and suppose for anyone who has a sports career like that, that has a beginning and an end, beginning, middle, and end. And I'd imagine for sportsmen, sportswomen, coming out of that is very difficult. Like, what do you do now? You don't have those glory days to fall back on. You're not part of the team anymore. You're all of a sudden just out on your own.
But that's one of the biggest causes, I'd say, of people turning to alcohol or gambling. That if you thought you were going to get the high or keep the high of being a player at the top, and have playing in front of 85,000 people in Croke Park and getting the adulation and the love for all the work that you do, and all of a sudden you don't have that anymore, it can be very hard to let go of what once was. And I feel like that's one of the key kind of things that people need to understand about the GAA, that it is temporary, and you are at the top for a little while, and new heroes will come along. Your legend, your legacy will always stay, but the feeling of the adulation and the worship that you get for being such a top player, it does go away when you stop playing the game. And I feel like one of the key things is that to understand that every player does go through it. Every player feels the nerves. Every player feels the mental health repercussions of a tough defeat. I mean, losing in an All-Ireland final must be one of the most painful things that anyone can go through. And it's no wonder now that it is getting better, that there are sports psychologists now involved with every single inter-county team. But they're the inter-county teams. They're the best. Not every club team has a sports psychologist on board, and not every college's team has a sports psychologist on board. So the awareness needs to spread down to the managers that, in my opinion, if you're a manager of a team, I think you need to be able to spot when a player needs to be cut some slack, when a player needs to be given a bit of a rest, that it's not just, I mean, me personally, there was one time that I was involved in the team, and the manager that we had was very kind of old school manager. And I remember he just berated one of our players in the team talk for not playing his best, but everybody knew he wasn't playing his best. And I just remember he berated him in front of the whole team that you're getting roasted. And I remember thinking at the time that he was doing this to a guy who was naturally very shy, very timid. And I was thinking that's gonna mess with his head big time. That you need to be cutting him some slack. You know what? He's a quiet guy. I'm not gonna berate him in front of the whole team because that doesn't work. I'm gonna take him to one side and put my arm around him and say, listen, are you all right? Like, do you want to be taken off? Like, because you look like you're not enjoying yourself out there. Because as you said yourself, it's a game. It's not the most important thing in the world. And that game that we were playing was a friendly. It wasn't even a championship game. It wasn't a championship final. It was just a friendly. And to see how serious he was taking it and putting that much pressure on his players, it made me really think that day that every manager should have some basic understanding of man management and how to spot if a player is down and needs to be kind of taken out of the firing line rather than having the pressure increased on him.
That's a great point. It's vital. It's difficult. I'd imagine it's difficult to try and get that sort of. I mean, as you say, at the top level, it's commonplace across the board because it's vital to results and it's vital to performance. But to get that down into a grassroots level, that's difficult. I'd imagine that's going to be difficult, and it'll be an ongoing thing. And hopefully, as more and more communities are, less hesitant to talk about things that are troubling them, things that are affecting them, it's it could happen. And again, that's just what we're trying to do. We're just trying to reach out to the average fella and say, listen, this isn't uncommon. It's not uncommon to feel the way you're feeling. You're feeling a bit lost. You're feeling a bit sort of low. That's okay. There's other guys out there like that. You don't have to be sitting there struggling. You don't have to be feeling isolated about it. You can come, you can chat to somebody. You don't even have to chat about your mental health. If you want to just come and shoot the breeze about, if we're starting to walk now in Cork, and our goal is to try and get a walk going in every big city, every major city in Ireland, and hope within with every sort of big local community. For the rural communities, if the fellas want to get together once a week and just talk about GAA, that's fine. That's great, because that's how it starts. It starts with talking about simple things. Like, I think people might think that I'm trying to get fellas to come along and all of a sudden tell me their troubles or tell me their woes. It's like, no, not at all. It's softly. It's about building up relationships. It's about building a bond. It's like, again, to take a sports side on it, you're not going to go straight in to be a championship winning team. It takes time to do those things. It takes preparation. It takes understanding, it takes nurturing. I think nurturing is an important word, and it sounds like that coach, he probably thought that, well, that's the old school way of doing it, and
Hmm.
a lot of people kind of approach me like me with my depression. You would have older family members, just suck it up. We just got on with it. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, that doesn't work anymore, and the old
And it
way
didn't
of,
work back then. It didn't
yeah,
work back then.
like,
And a lot of people suffered in silence back then. I feel like
yeah,
the attitude needs to change on that.
yeah. But I'd imagine that in Ireland, because the GAA is such like it's a juggernaut. It's a huge like, and I only appreciated that when I moved down to Cork. Um, you know, up north, it can become a political football. Pardon
Mhm.
the pun. But down here, you see that it really is a huge part of life, like it is. And for some communities and some parishes, it's all, it can be all or nothing. I
Yeah.
was sharing with the fella from Kilkenny, and he was telling me that, there it's hurling or nothing.
Yeah. And they don't
It's
even
like,
entertain Gaelic football or anything else down
no,
there. Like it can the thing that I would hate about the GAA sometimes is that you mentioned yourself, is that you get seen then as the right half forward, not as the bloke, like it that it can be used kind of as a level of what kind of man are you? Like, are you a brave man, or are you a coward, or do you run away when the going gets tough, etc. That it can be used a little bit like that.
yeah,
And that's by people that aren't aware of the mental health repercussions of something like that. And no, but I really love the idea of your dudes and dogs thing spreading. And I think the GAA is a brilliant, brilliant way to do that, because the
yeah,
GAA, as you mentioned, it's king in Ireland.
yeah,
Its organization is across the whole country, and it's in every single parish in the country. And if you're able to kind of get to GAA clubs, I feel like the organization and the awareness around mental health will grow a lot. And obviously, every GAA club, every GAA match has its fair share of dogs on the
yeah,
sideline, sipping out of the bowls and etc.
yeah.
So I feel like it's a brilliant way to do it. Starting in Cork, obviously. So how could people find your organization?
Well, at the minute, I mean, social media would be the main place. Um, as I said, it all started over in England, so everything is sort of running from there. The website is dudesanddogs.co.uk.
Hmm.
There's on there. Rolling it out in Ireland. I'm kind of trying to take the lead on that and get a bit of an Irish identity on it, and we would tailor it to things that are more, sort of Irish than say English. Obviously in England, rugby and soccer is a big thing,
Hmm.
so be the sports that people would associate more closely with. But here, it's about tapping into the GAA community. It's about tapping into the rural community. It's about tapping into the farming community,
Hmm.
and um, seeing that those are big important parts of Irish life, and they're probably the parts of Irish life where men get, I'd say, sidelined a fair bit because,
It's the parts of life with the most kind of toxic masculinity, in my opinion. That
yeah,
like just
yeah,
should have
and,
been
and that's
like.
that's what we're trying to do as well. We're trying to open up a conversation about what it means to be a man, and being a man in 21st century Ireland is very different to being a man in 1930s Ireland. You know,
Hmm.
they're two different times, and I think as things move forward, ideas have to move forward, and I definitely think like the GAA is more than capable of doing that. As you say, there's probably still parts of it that hold on to a lot of tradition. There's
Hmm.
nothing wrong with tradition. Like it's, you know, if if you're coming out as an ex-player and you're still holding on to your glory days, it's like these are gone.
Yeah.
You can enjoy them while they happened and absolutely celebrate it. Like You know, I suppose, if you're in the moment of playing in front of 85,000 in Croke Park, if you could have somebody on your shoulder saying, "Enjoy this,"
Just soak it up, yeah.
because it may never happen again.
Yeah. And one of the best examples I've seen of that was, I remember just Jack McCaffrey, I think it was one of the All Ireland finals, I think it was 2019, when Dublin were gone for the five in a row. And I remember watching him on the big screen in the pitch parade, the pre-match parade around the pitch, and just watching him and just a big smile on his face. And you could tell he was watching around like he was just soaking it all up. He wasn't feeling the pressure. He was, well, I imagine he was feeling some sort of pressure, or else something's not working, because the amount of people that were tuning in to watch that game. But he was really, by the looks of his body language and by the way he was looking around, he was really soaking the whole thing up, rather than just letting the pressure get to him and keeping the head down and getting super serious. He was appreciating what an amazing moment he's found himself in. Because that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying the balance. I'm not saying people should care less. I'm not saying people should, put less emphasis on it, because the sport itself is amazing. It's played such a huge part in my life. But that, I would say, strike a balance between understanding the player and understanding the person, and make sure that you not just see the player, but you also see the person that has the jersey on, that you see that they care so much about the sport. And if they make a mistake, it's not for a lack of trying.
Yeah. No, that's true. It's, there underneath that jersey, there's a person there, and it's, rather than taking everything from the top down, when you would see local clubs and the guys are on the side and they're trying to be tactical. It's like, these are kids, let them play.
Mm-hmm.
Taking that attitude from the bottom and taking it all the way up the top. Say, you say when you're going out to play in front of 85,000, you might win 5 in a row. You should be thinking, this is great. I'm going to have a week. I'm going out for a kickabout.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the attitude. It should be an attitude of going out to play. That's why we use the dog.
Yeah.
It's about going out to play. It's not about going out to be serious. It's about having a bit of crack. It's about enjoying life. It's about, taking yourself away from your troubles for it might just be for an hour a week.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a chance to go out and run about with the dog and be silly. That's what life's all about, man. That's, there's plenty of times to be serious, and there's plenty of times to be, put the head down. I think if you're going out to play, say, football or hurling, that should be a time to say, you know what, go out and enjoy it.
Exactly. Well said. Well, Mark, listen, it's been a pleasure having you on today. And the
Seamus,
organization, fantastic. And I hope that it spreads around the country, because it really is worth getting behind.
I hope so. Listen, Seamus, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. I love hearing stories from people who've experienced things like GA. I have a great deal of respect for sportsmen and women, and I will definitely be keeping tuned in, and I look forward to seeing how you get along. Thank you so much for having me on, and thanks for helping me spread the word.
No worries, Mark. Best of luck with the whole thing.
Seamus, you're a gent.
Thanks very much. Guys, that's the end of this interview. We hope you enjoyed it. And keep an eye out for our further content. Have a good one.